Hey, so welcome back, grade 10s. We're going to go through part 2 now of plant systems, which is specifically going to talk about photosynthesis. So we talked yesterday why plants were such an important form of life, if not the most important. And it primarily revolves around the fact that they can create their own food. And that process of creating their own food is what we call photosynthesis here. Okay? So that's what the topic of today's lecture is going to be, simply photosynthesis. Okay, recall, the plants are required for all other life forms to survive. Okay, so even if you look over at this food web here, even if you look at a mountain lion, you may think, well, why does a mountain lion need plants to survive? Because it doesn't eat plants. It's a carnivore. However, it's going to eat something like, say, a western, whiptail lizard, which would then eat a bird, which then eats a plant. So if you get rid of these plants, then you don't have any birds, you don't have any lizards, you don't have any mountain lions. So everything revolves around plants. If you eliminate these plants, so if we eliminated these plants, we would eliminate all animals because they all end up going down to these plants. However, it's a lot different. If you eliminate, say, the bobcat, if you cut out the bobcat, although it does have an effect, and it definitely will have an effect, it's not going to affect everybody on this food web. Okay, it will have a slight effect where, elimination of any species is definitely going to affect it, but it's not going to have as huge effect as if you eliminate plants. So that's why I say plants are the most important. Now, this is because plants are the only form of life that can create their own food, and therefore the start of all food webs, like I mentioned. Now, the process of plant making its own food is called photosynthesis, and photosynthesis occurs in all green plants. Okay, so the process of photosynthesis. Now, this is something that we should remember here, okay? It's a very important process, and if you stick with me in science, we're going to go through it a number of times, and it's the chemical formula for photosynthesis. So basically, the idea is that you take carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight. So these are the three things that we're going to combine together. Carbon dioxide and water, which are pieces of matter, and then sunlight, which is just energy. So we're going to take all these three things, combine them together, and what we get out is glucose, or also known as sugar, or also known as carbohydrates. They have several names, and oxygen gas. Okay, and that's the process of photosynthesis. We've got three things going in: sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water. And then we've got two things coming out: carbohydrates and oxygen. Okay. Now, photosynthesis mostly occurs in the leaves of plants. It can occur in the stems, and in certain plants, even in the flowers, but most of the time it's going to occur specifically in the leaves. Okay. And the general idea is carbon dioxide is absorbed from the air by the leaves. So carbon dioxide is just in the air, so it's all surrounding us. So we take that air out. Water is absorbed from the roots, okay, as well as the leaves. The leaves can absorb some water just as humidity, but it also brings up water from the roots. Okay, and then the sunlight is absorbed by the leaves. So that's where we're going to get all these three things from. Okay. Now, glucose and oxygen is used by the plant itself or by an animal. So now once we make these carbohydrates, this is what an animal comes and eats. It doesn't usually eat it can eat the roots, but it's really looking at where that plant is storing all of its food, whether it's in its fruit, or whether it's in a vegetable, or whether it may be in the leaves, or in the stem, okay, or potentially in some plants in the roots. But that's what animals are after. They're going to go after and eat those carbohydrates. Okay? And then we also breathe the oxygen that the plants provide. So this is the process. When we look at photosynthesis and why we really need to study it is because it really can help with our food growth. So farmers attempt to maximize this process and make as much glucose or food as possible from a single plant. Okay, they want to maximize photosynthesis because if they can, then their yields are going to be a lot higher and our food prices are going to be a lot cheaper. Okay? So maximizing photosynthesis requires complete control over temperature. So you have to make sure it's the proper temperature. It's not too hot, it's not too cold. Making sure you have enough carbon dioxide, not too little, not too much, water levels, and so on. If you want to be able to maximize growth, you want to have complete control over all of these parameters. So greenhouses provide the most control over these conditions and produce very high yields of products. Okay? It's very expensive to build a greenhouse, but it gives you the most control over your plants. Okay? If you grow outside of a greenhouse, it's much cheaper. However, you don't have as much control. You can't say, well, I like to have more CO2 inside here. You're dependent on the outside levels. Okay? As a job opportunity, agricultural science at Richtown College teaches techniques to improve farming efficiency. It will talk about different techniques to improve and to maximize your yields if you're interested in that. Okay, so in order to produce high amounts of food from a single plant or to maximize photosynthesis, Farmers must ensure that they have one. They have to have proper soil. So different plants require different types of soil. Some like sandy, some like dark soil. Also a different pH level, so really kind of the acidity of the soil. So how acid or basic it is, okay, as well as the type of nutrients that are in it. Now, fruits and vegetables require soils with richer nutrient levels than wheat and other grains. So if you have really high-end soil, like some of the soil that you see going out to Erio where they've drained a former marsh, that black dark soil is where you can grow a lot of really higher-end crops like fruits and vegetables. And then where you have lower-end soil, it's kind of like clay ground. That's where you would grow plants that require less nutrients, something like a wheat product. Farmers also want to ensure that you have proper water levels. So plants can't have too much water. You can't flood your fields or your plants will die. But you also don't want too little water. So you want a proper amount of water. And you can do this by this technique called irrigation. And you can do that by things like tiling and kind of putting little systems in place to ensure that you have the proper amount of water in your soil. And then the last one is maximum sunlight. It's probably the easiest. Little shade and maximum sun for most plants provides maximum photosynthesis. There is a few plants that prefer shadier areas, like something like a lettuce, but most plants prefer maximum sunlight. Okay, and that's how you're going to maximize the amount of photosynthesis that occurs, or maximizing the amount of food they produce. Okay, so that's it for plants for part 1 and 2. I know the second one's a little bit shorter, just because our first one was a little bit longer. But go ahead and work on those learning checks this week, and let me know if you have any issues. Thanks.